Rise today to speak upon a very important motion on behalf of my constituents of Brampton Springdale and also many other Canadians. The motion talks really about investing in Canada's future, investing in new Canadians and their skills and qualifications, investing in research and development, and investing in our young people. And most importantly, perhaps, investing in our children, the future of our country and the future of our society. It is unfortunate, Mr. Speaker, that we have seen, both from the speech from the throne and the previous government's track record, that despite the economic prosperity, despite our success within the international arena, that we have failed to really invest in our future. We take a look at our economic performance as a country, and we realize that we have one of the best track records in the G7. We are one of the 9th largest economies in the planet. Our provinces across the country continue to produce a fiscal surplus, and unemployment is at a 30-year low. And we have that track record, Mr. Speaker, due to the tremendous fiscal management of Liberal governments. We have that track record, Mr. Speaker, because this former Liberal government really had a vision. They had a vision for all Canadians, regardless of where you came from in the world, regardless of your socioeconomic status. This previous government really had a vision. And despite all of the glowing successes that I have spoken about in terms of our economic productivity and our economic track record, perhaps what is most discouraging, Mr. Speaker, is the fact that the gap between the rich and the gap between the poor has continued to grow. Despite our economic success, despite our economic growth, at a time in this point when the gap should have been getting smaller, the gap is actually increasing. It has grown faster, Mr. Speaker, in the last decade than at any point in time in the last 30 years. You know, in 2004, the richest 10% of Canadian families who raised children under the age of 18 actually earned 82 times more than the poorest 10% of our population. And we take a look at the fact that the majority of Canadians, over 80%, are actually getting a smaller share of the economy that they help generate. Mr. Speaker, the Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives has done a tremendous amount of work in trying to look at alternatives of how we actually close this gap between the rich and the poor. And that is why it is so important for this particular motion. Because when we take a look at the fact that the average pay of the top 100 CEOs in Canada has actually increased from $3.5 to $9 million between 1998 and 2005. That's a 262% increase. But then we take a look at, and one wonders, of what the average wage is in Canada. The pay actually increased between that time frame from 1998 to 2005, from $32,000 to $38,000. So while the CEOs had a 262% increase, we take a look at the average worker who only had an 18% increase. The gap is growing, and the gap is growing quickly. And that is why it is so important that this motion speaks about investing, about closing that gap, of ensuring that the over 500,000 seniors who are living in poverty, that the over 1 million children who live in poverty do so no more. But, Mr. Speaker, for that, we need to have a government with a vision, a government who is committed to closing that gap, and really a government who is committed to investing. So, Mr. Speaker, it's quite interesting when the opposition, the government spoke about reducing the GST. If they ever took a look and did the stats and did the math, they would realize that the proposed cut of 1% on the GST would have actually resulted for every single child in Canada, almost between the ages of 3 and 6, every single child in Canada between the age of 3 and 6 would have had access to a child care space.